Hi there, Kenny's Carrots, episode number 37. Today we're going to look at not the kind of faith that Abram had. We described that in our last episode. Today we're going to look at the kind of faith that the world says can exist or will allow to exist. And it's very different. You can compare the two. Again, we'll be quoting from Christopher Watkins' Biblical Critical Theory. Here's what he has to say. He says, the picture of faith most common in our society is far from this Abrahamic pattern that we discussed last time. Rather than Abram's informed public reliance, the ambient idea of faith in our culture could be characterized as an ignorant, private speculations. Number one, to the world, faith is usually considered as ignorant, following the pattern of the sublime and the dichotomy of local difference and abstract truth discussed earlier. The modern world has seen fit to make an absolute division between faith and knowledge, regarding all faith as irrational and speculative, on the model of the sublime, and all knowledge as rational and certain. It is the sort of move with which we are familiar from our discussion of the fact-value dichotomy. Faith, by definition, cannot rest upon evidence, for if it did, they say, then it would be knowledge and not faith. Number two, to the world, faith is construed as passive. To have faith in God is commonly understood as equivalent to holding an inner conviction that God exists. In other words, it is an assent to a particular truth that does not necessarily engage the individual in any specific public actions. In the same way that my faith that the plates and bowls are still in the kitchen cupboard does not commit me to any public actions. This sort of faith is quite happy to remain in the private sphere, and to let it transgress the boundaries of the private is seen as impolite and even a bigoted attempt to foist one's irrational convictions upon others. Number three, Watkins continues, faith is construed nowadays as superstitious. To have faith, or to be a person of faith, is to hold one particular unverifiable position about the nature of ultimate spiritual reality. As this is a position that is rigorously untestable, it makes no real sense to attempt to contrast it or compare it with other such positions. There are no immediate existential stakes to belief, apart perhaps from having one's curiosity satisfied that there is, after all, something out there. Quote, or unquote rather, and availing oneself of a psychological crutch. There is no reliance, no risk, no trust required. This is the sort of faith that fits with the modern dichotomized world of facts and values. And with the dichotomy between the particular and the universal, faith, like the sublime and like metaphysical speculation, is necessarily dislocated from reality, an opening onto something that, whatever it is, cannot be grasped by, contained with, or pinned down to rational categories, as the rhetoric usually goes. On this pattern, then, faith can only ever be the other of reason. This also has the unfortunate consequence of redirecting the emphasis from the object of faith, because on the pattern of the sublime there is no comprehensible object of faith, and onto faith itself. To be a person of faith is to believe in something. And what is important is not the something, but the belief. What is important is the fact that something is believed, not what is believed. It must necessarily be so because the sublime object of belief is thought to be radically irrational and not open to public scrutiny. The idea that there is a great gulf between Christian thought and secular thought, with Christian thought on one side resting upon something called faith, and secular thought on the other side resting upon something called reason, does little to help us understand either Christianity or secularism. In fact, this misapprehension itself leads to a dangerous tension at the heart of many modern approaches to knowledge. That's Christopher Watkin, and therein lies our difficulty today that our students are facing, our churchgoers are facing, our business executives are facing, the tension between the world, relegation of faith to something that's just private and it can't be shared, to the believer's faith that must be shared and needs to be shared. Next time, we'll continue with more gems from Christopher Watkins' Biblical Critical Theory. Thanks for joining us. If you like what you hear, please indicate so on the YouTube page that you're watching. And if you want to always know about these things, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Digging for Scriptural Gems.